I see some more people in the waiting room just about to join. All right, I think we can get started. In the interest of time, we have a large number of participants who are already here with us today. So thank you all for joining, and good morning, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Sanjeev Joshipura, and I'm the Executive Director of Indiaspora, coming to you from Fairfax, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. Welcome to this extremely exciting event. It's an event, obviously, with Indra Nooyi. And Indra, we are so proud of you as a community. Just delighted about taking lots of delight and pleasure in your various accomplishments over the years. Thank you for giving us your time today for what will be a candid conversation with the Indiaspora community. Indra needs no introduction, of course, but just a very quick one before I get to some housekeeping. Indra was the CEO and chair of PepsiCo from 2006 to 2019. She has won the Padma Bhushan Award and the Outstanding American Award by Choice, conferred on her by the US State Department here. She's married to her husband Raj and has two daughters, Preeta and Tara. She is the author also of a lovely memoir, which is why she's speaking with us today, My Life in Full. A lovely book that I would strongly recommend for those of you that haven't read it. Now, in terms of housekeeping, we are going to start with a fireside chat between Indra and M.R. Rangaswami, the chairman of our board and the founder of Indiaspora, and myself. And then we will leave ample time for moderated questions with all of you participants. We encourage you to either put your questions in the chat box or raise your hand using the Zoom hand raised icon, and we'll call on you to ask the question yourself. Indra's book is extremely authentic and honest, and we encourage all of you, as you're asking your questions and participating, to briefly share your own story. And don't be afraid to be a little bit vulnerable for the benefit of us all as a community. So with that, over to you, MR, to continue the conversation.
Thank you. Good morning, Indra. Good to see you again. And I read your book as well, and it was almost like a thriller. I couldn't put it down, and I read that in one shot. So thank you so much for the wonderful book. But first of all, I think I might have mentioned this to you. I might be embarrassing you. In my research for the book, I went back in time and found some photos. So I hope you don't mind if we share the photos, and to really, the backdrop for the photos is the following. There was a young girl in middle school, and they had a special day in school where they said, dress up and come as anybody you want to be. And this little girl decided to do this. So maybe Mansi, if you can bring the pictures up. Okay, so if that's my daughter, Anjali, Indra, and in middle school, they were told to dress up as whoever they want to be. And if you zoom in, it's hard to do. If you zoom in on her badge, it says, Indra Nooyi, CEO of Pepsi.
That's awesome. That's great.
I have no idea how that happened, but she might have overheard my conversations or influenced by other people. And that's the impact, Indra, you've made on the next generation of kids. They can be whoever they want to be, and they really believe that. So I just wanted to embarrass you and my daughter. When I told her I was going to do it, she's like cringing. But thank you for making that impact on my family personally.
Thank you.
But I want to start with your journey in Chennai, and I'm from Chennai as well. And when I read your first part of your book, I felt like it was my biography, right? We were living in parallel universes. Mm-hmm. You know, we had a family. My mother was the matriarch, gave birth to 7 children. My father passed away when he was young. And so she raised many of us. And the house was in and out, bustling with people. And so forth, and people coming in, shouting over each other. That was the environment we grew up. And we also had a grandfather who was a big civil servant and wrote the definitive book on Indian income tax law. And he was revered by the entire family. We listened to every word he said. He was soft-spoken, but any word he said, we grabbed onto, right? That's kind of the backdrop we grew. And I found in your book, there were those 2 similar people were your people that stood out for you, your grandfather, your tata, and your amma, your mother. So can you, and you talk about some of this in your book, can you elaborate on how they made an impact and lessons learned for you as you unfolded your life?
I tell you, writing the book was a journey and a difficult one, because you had to relive a lot of the stories and sort of remember a lot of things from the past that you sort of parked aside. And then you realize that all of us are a product, or sometimes a victim of our upbringing. In my case, I won the lottery of life. I was born into a family that believed in girls as much as they did boys. They believed that girls should be educated, and a lot of it had to do with my tata. He basically said, why should we differentiate between girls and boys? The granddaughters should be able to do as much as the grandson. And incidentally, I intend to invest all my time on making sure they do well, to the point where if we came home with a report card which had 95 in geography, he would take it personally and say, I must not have done a good job teaching you. It was never, why did you get this grade? It was, I must not have done a good job teaching you. So next time he would read more so that he could teach it to us even more. I don't believe people like that exist today. I don't think any of us are that noble and that unselfish. But I had the lottery of life, and that I had that kind of a grandfather. I had a father who I adored. My father was the love of my life. I write about my mother because my father passed away. My father was the love of my life. And my father believed in me. I was a middle child. Middle children always have it tough. The first child gets all the attention. The little one gets all the love. And the middle child is trying to find their place in society. My father committed his life to the middle child. So I had the benefit of that. So in many ways, I won the lottery of life. And I had a mother who should have been CEO had she gone to college, was not given that opportunity. She's still around. And she still acts as a CEO at home, but that's okay. And she basically, because of society, tried to put a foot on the brake, MR, but the accelerator always won. So even though she kept threatening to get me married at age 18, me and my sister Chandrika, somehow all those horoscopes didn't pan out, and we were allowed to travel across the ocean to the US. So I think we're all a product of our upbringing. And I was fortunate to have that luck of being brought up in a family that was strict, conservative. When I wrote this, people sort of didn't believe it. And I'm sure all of you have gone through this. I don't believe my family ever told me I love you. Not once. Nobody gave us a hug. Hugging was not allowed. My parents never hugged us. Even now, if I hug my mom, she says, don't hug me, please. They never hugged us. They never ever said, I understand how you feel. If you went there with a problem, it's like, tell a prayer or just go study some more, things will be okay. So it was sort of a dismissal of anything you may have as feelings. So different from the way we're supposed to parent here. But for some reason, we didn't turn out too badly. And so I owe it all to the strict but accommodating upbringing. Loving, but no demonstrative aspects of the love upbringing. And the fact that we didn't have much made a huge difference because we had to work hard for everything. Hard work, hard work, hard work.
Absolutely. And like I said, when I read your book, I thought I was living in a parallel universe.
You bet.
I went to school at Don Bosco and Loyola College. You went to Holy Angels and MCC. So it looked like, I'm surprised we never crossed paths. Maybe we did, but we didn't know each other.
And MCC was more fun than Loyola.
Yeah, that's probably true. You were co-ed and we were not co-ed. That was a big difference.
Very true. Very true. Yeah.
So anyway, that's fascinating to see those similarities. But then you also decided to go overseas, and I did at the same time as well. And let me relate one incident that I had, and you had many similar ones in your book. When I reached the United States, my brother lived in upstate New York. So my sister-in-law said, okay, I'm going to buy you pots and pans and spices, vegetarian food and all that, and sent me to college. And I went to Kent State University in Ohio. And I had to take the Greyhound bus to go to university, right? On the way, my pots and pans box got stolen. So I land up at the university with just my suitcase and no pots and pans. My host family was appalled. they immediately went and bought me everything they could, except the Indian spices, of course, right, in those days. But that's when I saw the warmth and hospitality of this country. In the 70s, the United States was welcoming of everyone, right? So welcoming. And now the whole mindset and the rhetoric now is anti-immigrant, very different, although I think the people are still extremely welcoming, as you write in your book. So what can we do as a society here in the US? People are still welcoming of foreigners and immigrants, but the rhetoric is so polarized. What can we do? And can you relate your life to some of the things we can do here?
I actually have a slightly different perspective. I think that immigrants are still welcome, those who are highly talented and highly educated, as long as it does not constantly take away American jobs. The fact of the matter is, thanks to incredible pressures from Wall Street, companies spent their time going through just-in-time inventory, outsourcing, offshoring, globalizing the supply chains. All made sense in terms of creating shareholder value. But in terms of doing that, we actually took away from American jobs and took jobs that paid well and kept downgrading them to lower and lower values, contributed to the overall deflation, and yielded enormous shareholder returns as a result. But most of the results flowed upstream, not downstream. It didn't go to the workers, it went to the tippy top of the American economy. So the workers, who are the middle class, large swaths of the middle class in America, basically looked at immigrants as taking away our jobs, either through offshoring, not immigrants, but offshoring, or immigrants coming illegally across the border and taking jobs for a fraction of what they're worth and depressing salaries. So you've got to understand where they're coming from. And if you were in their shoes, you would feel the same way. What has not been done is a huge investment in reskilling the traditional worker for a knowledge economy. Many of them have limited skills to be retrained for the knowledge economy. And I think we have to go back and look at legal versus illegal immigration. Look at it very carefully, because legal immigration is needed in the country to fill skill gaps, is needed for guest worker programs to fill jobs like picking in farms and all that stuff. But we are no longer populating America. We have a population here. So the big question is, what do we do with people fleeing persecution? What do we do with people fleeing issues? How much can the US tolerate them, and how can the safety nets pay for them? And I think that's all come to the fore, MR. So I think on immigration, we all have to dig into the deep details of immigration and take a more sensible point of view on immigration, not just say, oh my God, we're not getting enough H1s, or they've taken away the spousal support policies. I think those are tips of the iceberg. There's a broader issue we have to think and talk about and engage in a sensible discussion on this topic.
Thanks, Indra. I'm going to now turn it over to Sanjeev. He has a couple of questions, and then we'll move on to audience and our members as well. So Sanjeev, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, MR. Indra, I want to talk about a couple of issues that you raised in your book, which are very different in their own way, but still have a common underpinning. Let me get to the first one. Obviously, as an immigrant and a woman of color leading an iconic Fortune 50 company, your journey has been trailblazing, and you've broken so many barriers along the way. You mention in your book how, through that journey, your support system played such an important role. You had, obviously, your husband, your mother, your in-laws, and various others who especially played a great role when you were raising Preeta and Tara, your two daughters. Now, raising a family and working is a constant juggling act, as I can attest to. My wife works as a management consultant. I work here at Indiaspora, and we are raising 5-year-old twins. And neither of us would have been able to do our jobs had it not been for our support system. My parents, her parents, our extended families and support systems, and so on and so forth. In the United States particularly, one of the things that we struggle with is this, for new parents or for caregivers to elders, this social safety net, this support system. That's something we struggle with. You talk in your book about how when you were at BCG, you got some time off to care for your father, and how that was so meaningful and so important and so necessary at the time. And my question is, what is it that you think that we can do together as a community to make a better support system a reality for all?
You're asking a broader question, but let me focus it on the diaspora. I think that paid leave is something that has to come from companies or the government and companies working together. That's not something we can solve as a community, okay? But I think on this whole childcare issue and elder care issue, we can actually lean in as a community and see how we can help each other. It would be nice if we can do it in the context of a broader community, but to the extent that we all live near each other, I think we have to identify people who can take turns at supporting childcare. If you have childcare workers who are not fully qualified, can you have the elders in the community, sort of supervise the childcare workers so that you're comfortable that the child is under, a good pair of hands as opposed to worrying all the time as to what's going on with your child. So we have to come together, and what we have in our family, Sanjeev, we may have to create at the community level. Because there are a lot of retired parents inside our communities, and I think they would like to be around young people. What they don't want to do is to be full-time workers again. So how do you strategically leverage that? One of the things that we are working on is working with developers to see how we can build new communities, which has, young people and older people, coexisting. May not be of the same family, but, young and older people coexisting with a community center in the middle where children can be, cared for. They can come there after school. But then families who've got grown children can move out and the next group of families can come in. And older people, if they want to move out, they can. But a lot of cities are looking at building those kinds of communities. Singapore has those, but the US is now in Phoenix, they're building one of those. And so I think as an Indian American community, when we build communities in Orlando or Tampa or any other part of the country, we might want to think of it as mixed use communities as opposed to just older people. Because if we don't create our support structures, who is going to? And we can't always import them from India and then do what we had to do in the early days. Just won't work.
Yeah, that's a good point, Indra. And, for all our vaunted individualism here in the United States, which has its benefits, there's no question. I think there might be, and I think you're hearkening towards a society with a slightly more collectivist way of thought as well, and how to balance the two is, I think, the million-dollar question.
Yep.
Let me.
But it starts with the commitment to saying, family is family. Family is not female. We shouldn't say if you're going to have family, it's a woman's problem. We should say, hey, family is important for everybody. It's a center of our lives. And let's see how together we can help family creation and nurturing families. And together, how can we help other parents with families or with kids who might be problematic? Sometimes, and I'm not saying all of us do it, many of us do it. If we think of another Indian American family as a problem child, we almost exclude them from our get-togethers or whatever. And so I think it's important that we extend a helping hand to those families, because that's when families really need the help. And not say, oh, that kid has got these sorts of mental problems. Let's exclude that whole family in our social networks. I think it requires a rewiring of our heads too.
Yeah, you made many good points, Indra. And what you said about family not being a female issue is a good segue into my next question. Support systems, but in a completely different context. The number of women CEOs at large companies is gradually increasing, but is still abysmally low. And we are all the poorer for it, right? You've talked about this in your book. Now, the power structures in our society are created by men and heavily biased towards men. So what can we all do as men and women together to redress that problem, redress that balance, and make sure that there are a million other very highly talented women that follow in Indra Nooyi's footsteps?
Absolutely. I mean, you have to think of the math, first of all, and all of you are familiar. If you take a typical corporate pyramid, and I'll speak about PepsiCo, at the entry level and management layers, let's say we have about 15 to 20,000 people in PepsiCo. And as you go up, when you get to the C-suite, which is all the division presidents reporting to the CEO, there are probably 15, 16 jobs. And then there's one CEO. So just imagine those 16,000 people are going to get culled down at every level of the pyramid to get to 15 or 16 people, 5 of which 5 of those people may be candidates for CEO. Then you pick one. So the math is brutal. So to get to the top, not only do you have to do your job very well, you've got to constantly learn, you've got to grind your way up the pyramid and demonstrate that you are just better than anybody else before you can get to the top. It's a lot of work. Now, the reason that a lot of men have been able to ascend to the top and still have families is because they had a full-time caregiver at home, i.e. their wives. And their wives with it's a thankless job. They just did it. But today, a lot of the women struggle because if they want to have a family and nurture the family and still keep the job, first of all, at work, many times there's no pay parity. Women get paid less. There's a lot of unconscious bias. And then you come home, there's all the stresses of having to do a disproportionate amount of the housework, the childcare, sometimes not having the support. So what we do is, as a society, take this incredible talent group called women, who are 70% of the high school valedictorians, get more than 50% of the college degrees, get more professional degrees, get fantastic grades in STEM programs. And then we say, guess what? We're going to throw every roadblock in front of you. That's not a recipe for success. You wouldn't want it from your daughters. Why do it to women in the workforce? And so women struggle to move up because there's just too many systemic or systematic issues that hold them back. Because whatever you do saps their confidence, which in turn impacts their competence. If men in power came to the table and said, we want to accelerate the best talent, not just the best men, I think the argument and the result would be very different. And I think it requires a whole mindset change to say, if we want the best talent to move ahead, I think we would have a more equitable workforce. And I think there's work to be done to change mindsets of men to, come to the table and say, let's not immediately look at a woman and say, she must not be very good. Let's not say that. Let's not immediately laud a woman for her performance and ding her on potential. But then say the man didn't do so well on performance, but has huge potential. This is the and but phenomenon I talk about. Yale University just released a study that this happens, in every part of society. We have to address all of these issues. I think, I'll be honest with you, men and women I meet are extraordinary from the Indian American community in particular, but the women have come into their own in such profound ways. Let's give them a chance. If you had daughters, you'd want that for them. So let's give all of the women an equal chance and treat them as equal contributors to the economy.
Well said, Indra. In past conversations, you've talked about dualities, and sometimes the dualities result in dichotomies, unfortunately, which we have to end and change. I know that several people in our participant group, in our Indiaspora community, are itching to ask you questions.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to turn it over now to participants for a moderated Q&A. What I'm going to ask is, please raise your hand in the Zoom app, and we'll call on you to ask your question. You can also alternatively put your question in the chat box in Zoom. I do see 4 hands up right now, right away. And let me start with our member here in the Washington, D.C. area, Prashant Kothari. Prashant, if you can unmute and ask your question, please.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Sorry. Yes. Hi. So Indra, like as MR said, I grew up in Chennai. And I went to an Anglo-Indian school, Defton Corrie, and then Loyola. So about 10 years after you. And even though I didn't know your brother, I knew several of his classmates. He was, I think, 2 or 3 years older than me. And he was a mini legend even at that time when he came first in the state and went to Yale. And at that time, Chennai going to Yale was like a big thing for an undergrad. So I was like, that was reading the book brought back so many memories of Madras as you know it. And the other is other comment also is I was at a wedding just 6 months ago. One of my friend's daughters got married, and again it was a mixed. The daughter, the girl is Muslim from the north part of India, guy is Tamil Brahmin, but the father-in-law gave a lovely speech, to my friend's daughter, and he said, "Listen, one prediction I'm going to make. My daughter-in-law in 10 years will be the CEO, and not just any CEO, Indra Nooyi type CEO.
Oh my
And the
God.
entire wedding party burst out in applause. But I guess my question is you obviously had a fabulous career in corporate America. And, what do you see, next? What is the next avatar of Indra Nooyi look like?
I'll tell you something, Prashant. I'm busier now than I was even at PepsiCo. And between the boards that I work on, Amazon and Philips, I do so much for nonprofits, whether it's Memorial Sloan Kettering, the Partnership for Public Service, the National Gallery of Art. I mean, there's just a wide variety of nonprofits that I'm involved in. I teach up at the US Military Academy in West Point, and I spend an inordinate amount of time with those cadets. They've gotten under my skin. They're just amazing people, and they teach me a lot. Believe me, I learn more from them than I contribute. But I've been doing that for 3 years. It was a 2-year appointment that kept getting extended, but it's been a very fulfilling thing. And then one thing I did, which I would encourage all of you to do, in the last year, I mentored 20 kids in the area, Indian American kids, freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors, high school kids. And I must tell you, over the period that I mentored them, and I used to meet with them every week or every 2 weeks, then met with them one-on-one, and then brought them together for a dinner because everything was done on Zoom through COVID. Many of them went from no confidence to supreme confidence in a nice way, scared of their shadow to saying, I too count. They felt comfortable to share with me their hopes and dreams and aspirations and their love life when even they were afraid to talk about it to their parents. Of course, I told the kids that I would share with their parents anything that worried me. And then I met with the parents in 2 sessions to give my feedback to them. It was the most fulfilling mentoring session, most fulfilling. I feel like I got 20 more kids in addition to my 2. And I will just tell you, for all of us Indian Americans in positions of power, we have to think about how to give back in profound ways to the Indian American community, but most importantly, to our communities at large. One of the criticisms I get, Prashant, is that the Indian American community does not do enough for the communities in which we are a part of. And I think we have to give back to the community overall, not just to Indian American temples or Indian temples or Indian American groups. So I feel great about everything I'm doing. 75% of what I do is to the community at large. 25% is a deep involvement in the Indian American communities. And both here and in India, I mean, I'm working on building Anganwadi 4.0 for childcare for workers. So, we're doing a lot of work in this area. I would urge all of you, hand on heart, to think about what you can do to give back to local communities.
Thank you, Indra, and thank you, Prashant. I'd like to welcome our friend from cold Ottawa, but warm Canada. And many of you that have followed Canada's example over the past couple of decades or several decades know exactly what I mean by that. But Goldie Hyder, over to you.
Well, it is minus 37 here, in case you're wondering how cold it actually is. So, Indra, what a pleasure to see you. I feel, first of all, obligated to find a Chennai connection. So I'm a Hyderabadi, so don't hold that against me.
Close by.
But I did live at least a year of my life in Chennai. So I guess I can claim that. So my question for you, first of all, I run the Business Council of Canada, which is the counterpart to the Business Roundtable that I know you were a long time member of. So I had the opportunity to, interact with Canada's top sort of 150, 170 CEOs. And as you know, big companies, they're built to last. That's why they're big. And many of them do it by reinventing themselves and trying to stay ahead of what's coming. So my question to you really is then, how do you future-proof when you look at the mega trends? What do you see as the mega trends for the next decade and beyond that we should be mindful of?
So Goldie, I'll just say that companies should be built to last. I'm not sure people run the companies to last. CEOs tend to run the company for the duration of the CEO rather than the duration of the company. I reference a poem in my book, the Lord Tennyson poem called The Brook. And, it's a beautiful poem. If you get a chance, read it. The refrain says, "For men may come and men may go, but I go on forever." That's what companies are intended to be. CEOs may come, CEOs may go, but companies should be reinvented and constantly be positioning itself for the future. And you're right, you've got to look way ahead of the mega trends and work future back and retool the company. Here's my suggestion: get from Sanjeev or MR my email, and let's talk about mega trends, because that's a session unto itself. I'm getting ready to frame it into a speech, but I can share with you my mega trends and we can have a conversation about whether it makes sense. But the difference between then and now is, in those days, I had to worry about the mega trends as it impacted my company. Now I'm able to think about mega trends as it affects society as a whole and what needs to be done to address them. And so I have a different lens towards mega trends. So I'd be happy to share them with you. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Goldie. I want to turn it over now to Vanitha Narayanan, former senior executive at IBM and now on the board of India's largest renewable power company.
Oh, hello, Vanitha.
Hi, Indra. We had a brief opportunity to meet when Shiv introduced us.
Yes, I remember now.
You had a hand in a cast at the Pepsi 25th anniversary celebration in Delhi. And again, I have to say, plug for Rosary Metric and Stella Maris. And I think I thought more about my tata while I read your book than I had in a long time. And also have another, I could relate to the part of the supportive husband. So we've talked a lot about the women needing support, and my husband followed me across the world to multiple countries. And when you have a supportive husband, it's actually hard on them as well. And when so it's, as we as a community look at how we support the women, I think the opportunities of men who are supporting their wives' careers probably need another level of support in society as well. Indra, again, a huge, as we all are a fan of all the work you've done. You've talked a lot about your time as you ran PepsiCo and retired. I guess my question is a little bit about your board activity. And you've been on boards even before Amazon and Philips. I guess my question is, when you're on a board, after being an active CEO, it's an adjustment to a different way of operating. Can you share with us any decision that you made as a board member or didn't make that you've sort of gone back and thought about because you not want a heavy hand, but you want to be an involved board? And any learnings that we might benefit from without, obviously giving away anything confidential?
First point I'd make to all of you is, if you want to get on a board, think hard why you want to be on a board, especially a public company board. Don't just get on for the money or for the prestige, because boards have enormous responsibility and you've got to take that role very, very seriously. So think hard before you become a board member. Second, be on a board where the board is not stacked by the CEO, but is shaped for the company. Sometimes CEOs just put their friends on the board. Don't get on such a board, because then everybody is beholden to the CEO. Your job as a board member is not to be beholden to the CEO, is to make sure that you represent the shareholder interests properly. So you've really got to have clarity as to why you're on the board. Third, if you're a sitting CEO and you're on the board, you don't have the powers of a sitting CEO. The CEO has the powers. You have to recognize your role that you are representing the shareholders. And fourth, if you don't have the courage to walk away from the board at any point in time, i.e., you're not dependent on that board fees to live, okay? You can be a better board member than if being on that board is really, really, really important to you. If it is really, really important to you, you'd be very careful how you conduct yourself on the board. You will be what I call a sympathetic, endorsing board member as opposed to real board member. So those are my overall comments. Now let me get to specifics. When you're on the board, when you step out as a CEO, when you're not the CEO of the company, whether you're retired or not, you have to understand that if you get too close to the company, you're akin to running the company. So you've got to have a degree of separation from the company, but you've got to understand the company. So spend the time zooming in to understand the business and what the company's value creation areas are, understand the talent, understand, whether the company has good succession, and then step back and let the company do its job. Ask the right questions at the right time, and don't always criticize the CEO and the company. Judiciously give your feedback on the CEO and the company, and try to do as much as you can one-on-one with the CEO or through the chairman. There's a separate chairman of the board. So you've got to really think through best practices on being a board member, which sometimes are not taught in schools, and then adopt those lessons. One thing could be, in the Indian American community, many people on boards, maybe we have a session on what's the best way to be a board member and exchange ideas. Because I think Indian Americans now have reached positions of power where they should be invited on boards a lot. And ultimately, when you go home after a board meeting, you should say, I earned my pay as a board member. Not that I attended a board meeting and got some bucks. My shareholders, if my key shareholder was sitting in the room as a fly in the wall, they would be proud of what I did in this board meeting. Okay.
Thank you, Vanita. Great question. Indra, I'm glad you mentioned that about, how to serve on a board and maybe having some kind of a group conversation about that. As it turns out, Indiaspora is planning exactly that in February. And it shouldn't be a surprise that Vanita is one of our speakers at that event.
Oh, wonderful. That's great.
For the next question, I don't know where in the world you are. I know that Nishit Desai, you run a multinational sort of legal organization and think tank, but I know you're based in Mumbai. So welcome, I guess, from Mumbai for your question.
Hi, Nishit.
Okay. Indra, wonderful to talk to you. We met at US IBC and some other forums. Ardent admirer. Little provocative. We started with immigration issue. Now, the American language changed from what it was 25 years ago to globalize, open up markets, not only for goods, but also for services, mobility of human beings around the world and like that. And of course, today, even a lot more is written in immigration law. Laws are worse for human rights violation, protectionist, because it's a right to prosper today, just being bare living. So people should be able to move around the world. Now, what I see 5 years ago, we were talking very different language. And now we are talking slightly different. Now in India and other become protectionist, okay, then there is, people don't like it, right? So I think I'm just as to, we talked about state when can it kind of thing.
Nishit, you're breaking up so much that we can't hear you properly. You know what? Can you kill your video and just talk audio? I think you don't have bandwidth.
Oh, my apologies. Sorry. Okay. This is
Are the others able to hear Nishit clearly?
No, Nishit was breaking up a little bit, Indra. I was about to mention that.
Yeah. So go ahead, Nishit. Now speak. Yeah.
So sorry for that. Well, I said I'm an ardent admirer. What you achieved, what you've done, and I've all of times before.
We heard all that. Just get to your question, because I think it's a very good question you were just beginning to ask.
Immigration issues, that about 25 years ago, American language is very different to open up national boundaries, both for goods and services. And now the languages got changed, So each becoming, or at least a protectionist measure, and it's considered to be part of human rights now, because human rights are no longer the right to prosper and migrate well thing. And how do you reconcile that 20 years ago? And I'm trying to be wrong. It's just
Sanjeev, I'm missing the question. Can you please?
Yeah, I think what Nishit is talking about is, America is turning more protectionist. And how do we sort of balance the fact that on the one hand, a lot of the trading aspects of America in the past, our openness has resulted in our success. But now the issue of protectionism, which is stemming from something you talked about, Indra, earlier, which is a lack of security among the populace here, that stems from the rising economic tide not lifting all boats. How do you reconcile this?
And how do you
The thing I would say to all of us is, we always point to America and say they're not open enough. They used to be open, they're not open now. Tell me which country in the world is open?
America is the leader.
What?
America is the leader.
I mean, always has been. Even today, America used to be there. Now it may have come down a bit, but all of the countries have gotten worse in terms of protectionism. So I think that if we were to put our hand on heart and think about the US, we are still the most open country in the world. We still encourage anybody to contribute to the economy. We still have an opportunity for all of us to thrive and our children to thrive. And so I think that we shouldn't be saying America has become more closed. America is thinking hard about immigration for economic reasons. And I honestly believe versus all of the countries where most people don't want to immigrate to, I think the US is still the country that everybody wants to come to. Find me 2 other countries in the world that people want to go to. So I would stop and say, yeah, there are human rights issues, but every human rights issue cannot be exported to the United States. Governments have responsibilities to handle human rights issues in their countries too. And the US cannot go in and address every country's human rights issues. That's just my pragmatic perspective, okay? I think we have issues in our own country to address here, just as India has its issues and China has its issues and other countries have their issues. But I actually believe we should all take a more positive perspective of the US and the fact that, relatively speaking, it is still the most open country in the world. And I'm proud of that.
Well said, Indra. Thank you, Nishit, for your question, and sorry about the bandwidth issues. I'd like to now invite the leader of a women's entrepreneurship fund, Seema Chaturvedi.
Thank you, Indra. Thank you, Indra. Greetings from Miami. I've been told you come here occasionally. Hope to meet you the next time you're in town. I had a privilege of meeting you earlier. I'll keep my question really brief in the interest of time. I know there's several hands raised. I want to take you back to the discussion about gender inequity. And I've dedicated my, after 25 years, but who's counting career in investment banking, to taking this on a professional level by setting up a gender smart fund, as I like to call it. It's been like pulling at a yarn, and it keeps unraveling and showing the gross inequities in every dimension. The most important being the access to capital. And that seeds a lot of, I call it the potency of capital, which is where there's a lot of inequity emanating from. And it affects everything, including, for example, climate change affects women, especially in developing markets, far more disproportionately. And I'm writing on the issue. What might be your advice to the champions of the economy to unlock this capital flow, to be it women businesses, but also to innovation that genuinely promotes gender equity? Because there seems to be a bottleneck somewhere.
It's getting better. I would say because of ESG metrics, people are now beginning to think about female-focused companies, increasing sourcing from female-run companies, and even directing money to female-run funds. ESG is actually helping that. The worry that I have, Seema, is that when administrations change, will the focus on these things change? Again, I don't know what the new priorities will be of any new administration, but I hope this is not politically the right thing to do as opposed to the right thing to do. Because ESG has to be viewed as it's a universally right thing to do. And so I think we have to sit down and ask ourselves the question, why do investors balk at giving money to female-run companies? Have we talked about the fact that you shouldn't give us the money because we are female founders, rather, or female managed funds, rather we provide outstanding returns? There was a study recently which said female-run funds actually outperform many others. Again, the numbers were very small. That's why people question its statistical validity. But I really believe that we have to talk about the fact that you shouldn't give us money just because we have women running it. It's because we have women running it and we give great returns to you. Because when it comes to money, the almighty buck speaks louder than any other aspect. I've noticed that. They might pay lip service to ESG. At the end of the day, it's how do you beat an index? Or how do you beat a comparable? And so we have to make the case for that. And that's where I think a lot of what we need to do is making the case for ourselves through stories. And then finding 2 or 3 real supporters to come forth and tell the story along with us, men in power. Because women can't keep talking about women. We need the men in power to come in and say, I agree with what Seema said, this is fantastic. And then bring people along.
To quote Hamilton, we have to be allowed in the room for that.
We have to be allowed in the room. You know, Sarita Nair is here. I remember even in Davos, when we talk about issues on family and work and all that stuff, it's mostly women talking to women, all right? And I could swear, I have no proof, but many of the men in the room are there only because they got a seat in a room to do their emails. And people are really not passionate about those issues. I think we need men in power to be truly passionate about these issues. And, you know, Sarita, maybe it's a challenge to you. World Economic Forum ought to take this whole issue of family and support for families, make it more central. I read all of the articles. I'm yet to see a compelling piece of research and writings on this is one of the seminal issues facing young people today. So I think that if we start to elevate the importance of women in society and direct more attention to them as great performers rather than just the gender, I think we could actually have a positive outcome.
Thanks, Indra.
Yeah, I don't know if I should intervene the next person's part, but I certainly appreciate the challenge. Indra, you've always done that for us. So, and actually there is a lot of work happening now that is about how everyone is supporting it, the men's. And it's interesting, even like the women ERG that we have at the World Economic Forum ourselves, majority of our discussions and sessions are about engaging everybody. So it used to be that it was only the women getting together, and now it's all about actually how you're engaging everyone against, towards the issue. So I think a lot of change is coming.
That's great news, Sarita. Good to see you, and thank you for that update.
Absolutely right, Sarita, Indra, Seema, time for lip service is over. Men have to be engaged on this issue and be passionate about it and lead as well. I'd like to invite technology executive and now a mentor, Sushma Rajgopalan, for her question. I have one request of our participants. Indra has obviously been very generous with her time, but we are coming close to the end of our session. So if I could request the questions be kept brief so that Indra can respond.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Indra, lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too.
And, I've been sort of looking forward to this day, and I can't tell you that I'm reading your book and I'm savoring every page because there is so much of it that resonates, including my grandfather was also Anantanarayana Sharma. Okay.
Oh my God. Okay.
But every little thing that you have pointed out there is something that one can identify with. So thank you for writing it. And it's I think it's a huge lift to a lot of women in business. Just have one question for you. I know you're very passionate about leadership and leadership development, as I am. And there's so much talked about and bandied about, digital leadership and how the digital world is looking for different kinds of talent. What are your views on it, Indra?
Well, the world is changing. Technology is invading every part of our life. And I'm using the word invading in its strictest sense. It's rendering a lot of people in my generation redundant, and it's giving a lot of importance to the younger generation that are technology natives as opposed to technology aliens like us. But the big difference is that people of the older generation know how to understand the technology and adapt it and adopt it in companies. Young people just blindly adopt it. I think big difference. The best example I'll give you is that young people give their data to anybody who asks for it. I'm yet to see a young person stop and say, what are the privacy issues? Should I give my email and my address and every credit card information to some strange entity that's asking for it? Because when they're hacked, they turn to their parents and say, oh, I've been hacked. Can you take care of it for me? And then the parents spend hours and days fixing it. Our generation, a little bit more responsibility. Where do you give the data or the digital data? Where do you not give data? Having said that, I'm not trying to bash the younger ones. I think that there is a new world that's emerging. There's no question about it. Leadership is leadership. It's how do you get leadership that understands what they're doing in this new world. You can't have an old school leader running a technology company because you'll automatically put the brake on development. You need a combination of people who understand how to adapt and adopt the future technologies, at the same time, not have this mindset of, no, you can't go so fast, or no, you can't invest in these. Allow these technologies to bloom, allow them to flourish and thrive, but know how to moderate them. And so I think this combination is what's going to make leadership difficult and exciting. And I'm glad I'm not CEO anymore. I'm glad I'm not CEO anymore.
Oh, I would love to have this interaction. I'll just end with one comment. You know, the quote that you put in, for man may come and man may go, but life goes, you know. So that was something that my father used to tell me when I was growing up. So I tell you, it's such a cherishable book, and I am savoring every little word that you have written there. Thank you, Indra.
Thank you, Sushma. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sushma. Indra, am I allowed to do a small bait and switch on you and extend by 10 minutes because there's so much? Okay, thanks. Yeah. Appreciate it. Okay, good. I'd like to next call up Smita Siddhanti, a technology leader and a company founder and CEO, and my neighbor in Northern Virginia.
Hi, Smita.
Hi, Indra. Awesome. Pleasure to meet you. Known you since my husband was at BCG and you were a senior there. But as it have it, last 2 years, I've been leading the Thai global women entrepreneurship around the world. So the 30 countries that we worked in, I have to say that the euphoria of women coming into the being and getting into the entrepreneurship has just touched me. And I've never seen it, from South Africa to New Zealand to, of course, all parts of India and small cities, as well as big, and US and Canada and everywhere else, and Europe. So it's truly, the time has come, as you just pointed out, in terms of demographics also, the way it's aging population in here. And then I also have a grandson I just have, so I see my young people struggling. So when I look at the whole picture, it's just very clear to me that the place where a lot of thought needs to be given is how do we encourage these women, as Seema just pointed out, about funding, about their balance of life, about how the society should be organized in a way that, and you just kind of touched on it in various ways, with whether it's ECG or whether it's bringing communities where the older people can be used, whether it's India or here, everywhere. That whole concept is also very entrepreneurial in a very way. You can actually have lots of entrepreneurs start businesses in that fashion. But I think getting that concept right, I just feel very strongly that, that active parenting along with balance, the whole, your book is very much about that. And I think all of our lives are very much about that, having lived balancing it all. So I think that it would be great to have some kind of a workshop or conference or brainstorming with you separately. I would highly appreciate that we can come up with some concrete things that can help the world. So thank you for that, and hope I can get a chance to follow up with you later.
Yeah, I look forward to it, Smita. I tell you, when you think about dreams that you have, every time I look at the statistics on Indian Americans, where it says that we have the highest percentage of college degrees or master's degrees, our median income is the highest, basically says we have thrived in the US. We thrived in India because it self-selected us to come here, but we're still thriving. But why don't we say to ourselves, we'd like to see an Indian American community where 100% of people are college educated. where there is no incarceration of any Indian Americans because we are, we support each other, we pull each other up, and we make sure that we don't do anything bad to this country that has really welcomed us and made us, call this a great home for us. What if we said we are one of the best community contributors? I think we have to lay some noble goals for ourselves and say to ourselves, how can we not just be the most affluent community, but first of all, work on the part of our community that needs to be pulled up and then contribute overall to a broader community. And I think that would benefit women in our community, outside the community, and actually increase what they call the blast radius of this incredible power of the Indian American community in a positive way, the blast radius in a positive way.
And that dialogue is very necessary. So thank you for starting it. And I think you would be an awesome leader in that.
I think MR and Sanjeev Joshipura will do a fantastic job, and I'll certainly be a part of it.
Yeah, we should definitely think about it, and I'm happy to take lead in that with you. Yes, thank you.
Indra, actually, thanks to our members' leadership and their support, Indiaspora is actively engaged in being a platform for philanthropy, not just towards India, which of course we encourage, but also the give where you live philosophy, which you have talked about so much, whether it's here in the United States and now expanding to the UAE, the UK, Canada, Singapore, and as our work expands globally, even beyond that. So I think you make a very good point. I'm now going to bring up, Varsha Rao coming up next? Varsha Rao of NERCS.
Varsha, you're on mute.
Okay, I unmuted myself. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, Indra. Your book was phenomenal. My dad passed probably about almost 3 years now, and reading this book, he actually went to Christian college. It touched me so much. You seem so incredibly strong in everything you speak about now, in your book. And, I'm not a young woman. I'm 51. And I've had incredible success in my life. And yet I still feel sometimes where I'm being blocked, and I have these challenges, and yet I have people depending on me as a CEO of my company. And so I'm wondering if you ever felt these challenges and how you managed, trying to be a strong leader to your people, but where you were finding resistance based on potentially your sex, potentially the way you looked, the way you came across, other things that maybe were not based on results or that were in your control. And how do you manage that?
It's a sort of a painful-ish question, Varsha, because life is never a straight line. I mean, you can write a book which makes it look like a meteoric rise from the JNCT Road in Madras to the pinnacle of PepsiCo and wealth and fame and everything. I wish it was that way. It was not. There are many zigzags along this line. And a lot of those zigs and zags didn't have a space in the book because that takes you down a path of sadness. Okay, so let me go through. When you're in a terrible car accident, you don't know what your future is. I mean, when I went through the car accident in '86, I had no idea what my future was going to be. I had to relearn names. I had concussion, I'd broken my hip. I mean, I wasn't walking. BCG requires you to travel to all clients. I knew my consulting days were over, but I didn't know what my future was. But at the same time, I think one of the things that's very important, my husband and I decided very early in our married life that we would live so that we can live comfortably on the lower of the two salaries. We never lived to what we could live at. Okay. I live in the same house for 30 years here. When I became CEO, I didn't upgrade to a mansion. Okay, so there was always this comfort level that if we lived to a modest lifestyle, which we can always expand, it's harder to contract your lifestyle, then you can handle all crises differently than if you don't have that flexibility, economic flexibility. So that's one on the monetary side. Now, let me tell you the rest. I put myself in a hole. Every time I went to a meeting, I was the only woman, I was the only colored person, only immigrant, every which way. I always felt people looked at me and said, what is she doing here? Why is she in this room? What gave her the right to be here? So I could feel that emotion, even if people were not thinking that way. I pretended there was a cloud over them where they were going, who is she? What is she saying? Look at the way she's dressed. It's god awful. Didn't she wear the same thing yesterday? I'm thinking of all those things that I felt about myself. So any meeting, I went to a hole. I put myself in a hole and I said, I have to dig myself out. Then come to even and then move ahead. So every meeting I was over-prepared, over-prepared. If I had to read so much, I read so much. It was an enormous commitment of time, Varsha, enormous commitment of time. And I write in the book someplace saying, I'm wired differently. I looked at all of these as challenges. And I said to myself, I chose to come to the States. I chose to get married. I chose to have kids and have a career. And I chose to do well at the job. So I cannot blame anybody else. I cannot expect everybody else to help me except my husband and maybe my extended family. So I had to build the courage and the resilience myself, because who else is going to do it for me? There were times that I wished I could just have a damn good cry. But I can only do it in the confines of my room. If I did in front of my husband and go, God, again, you're crying. So, you got to worry about your relationships too. Friends run away from you if all that you do is cry with them. And so you've got to build your own support structure within yourself. Resilience, resilience, resilience. And that is the toughest thing as you ascend to the top of a company. Resilience, courage, not constantly bringing your troubles home and boring everybody at home.
Thank you so much. Such great, inspiring words. And I think what you say about that, it seems the putting yourself in the hole and the bubbles, it is something I can so relate to. And yet I keep doing it. And so, there must be something that, and you do build a muscle. So, but you do such a wonderful job, honestly, about how you convey. It gives us all a ton of just strength, and it's super inspiring. So thank you.
Welcome, Varsha. Good luck to you.
Thank you, Varsha, for your question. We are so glad to have our community leaders as part of this conversation with Indra, because thoughtful questions prompt thoughtful answers. So thanks so much. I'm going to turn it over to Seema Kumar, Senior Executive at Johnson & Johnson.
Hi, Indra. How are you?
Hi, Seema. How are you?
Good.
Man, thank you for that fantastic article you did in your magazine. Wow.
Thank you. And the television show is going to be airing tomorrow evening.
Oh my goodness.
On TV Asia. So, looking forward to, I'll share that information with everybody so people can watch it. It was a great interview. I know a lot of people have their hands raised, so I'll keep my question quick. And it has to do with women in the workforce. A record number of women left the workforce during COVID-19. And even with job flexibility and all of the support infrastructure that they got, that didn't preclude women actually from leaving because of the double, triple burden of being a woman. So how do we ensure, what do we lose when women leave the workforce, number one? But number two, how do we ensure that we come out of this she-cession, if you want to call it, the recession of women leaving the workforce?
It goes back to what we said. The minute we say family is female, we've lost it right there. There's a husband and wife, both need to contribute equally to the workload. It can't be family is female, you take care of everything, the home, your job. Incidentally, we need your paycheck also to create wealth in this family. The expectations on women is just too much. The stress just gets you down. Suddenly school closes, the kids are home. What are you supposed to do? All right, childcare is shut down. In any case, you never sent your children to childcare. You're not going to the office, but you're working from home. The internet doesn't work, or the kids need your help. They always need your help. So I think the husband and wife have to sit down and talk about, you go to work 2 days this week. Next week, I'm going to work 2 days a week in the office. just getting out of the home. So they've got to set up some sort of a schedule. So there's equality in this whole arrangement, as opposed to more and more and more of the burden being put on the woman. I think we have to worry about the mental health of women too. I think through this particular pandemic, domestic violence has gone up in triple digits. Divorce rates have gone up, and women are mentally exhausted, physically exhausted, mentally stressed. And as a society, we can ill afford to have women who are, in many, many families, the backbone of a family, to go through what they're going right now.
Absolutely. Well said. I think we talk a lot about physical health, but mental health is, sort of like the silent, hidden thing that we haven't addressed fully yet. Thank you, Indra.
Pleasure, Seema. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you, Seema. I'm going to bring MR up back on the screen.
Sanjeev, just 1 second. Can we just have Nikhil Chaturvedi? His hand has been up since we started this whole session.
Let's do that. Nikhil?
Yeah,
Thank you, Indra.
Sorry. Where's Nikhil? Oh, we lost Nikhil.
Nikhil, yeah.
Nikhil,
if
there
you could
it is.
unmute, please.
Yep. Hi, thank you for taking my question. I'm actually a BCGer right now. I work out of the Miami office, and I know you're a big Yankee fan. Been a diehard Yankee fan my whole life, and anxiously waiting the end of the lockout. Yeah, I come from a data science background, and one thing, and I do enjoy consulting a lot. I enjoy coming to work every day and having a different problem to solve than the day before. One thing that's been a bit of a culture shock is, going from I'll give me 500,000 rows of data and I'll come with a hypothesis to the whole consultant's, 80-20 mindset and looking at things in a big picture view. I know you and a lot of Indian people come from a STEM background. Is that something you struggled with as well, that sort of transition to, looking at things from a bird's eye view? And can you talk a little bit about what you did to develop that skill?
So, the wonderful thing about what you're doing these days, Nicholas, discipline is badly needed for the future. What you're doing is a fundamental of AI, which translates to machine learning, all of that. So this whole data analytics area is an understated discipline. So more power to you that you are studying this. I grew up at a time when the computer barely existed. And, no Zoom, no smartphones. I mean, we thought pagers was advanced technology. So, I grew up as a CEO in a very different time. I have to tell you that zooming out, zooming in, it's not enough to look at things from a bird's eye perspective, constantly telephotoing this lens to understand, thinking broadly and then saying, how am I going to land this? Thinking broadly and saying, how am I going to implement it? Is a learned issue, is an observed issue, and it's something you have to get from, stuff that you do, reading books, watching videos, learning from other people, going through your BCG case team meetings to see how people think. Because it's not something they teach in business schools. Business school education needs to be remade in such profound ways. But, there's one group of people who are absolutely resistant to change, and that's business schools. Business schools need to be remade to be teaching all these stuff, all these disciplines in a very different way. And so, Nikhil, you're in the right place. Observe, watch, read, learn, see how other people are doing it. And I think you'll go places too.
Sounds good. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Nikhil. MR, where's my friend?
One last question, Indra, if you don't mind, before MR closes. Can I invite Razat Gaurav from either Chicago or Austin, wherever you are, Razat?
Yeah, I'm in Austin today. Sanjeev, thanks for squeezing in this question. Indra, great session. Inspiring words. Coincidentally, I'm a former colleague of Raj from his brief stint at I2. And what I'll say is, the traditional dictum was, behind every successful man is a woman. I think behind every successful woman, in your case, is a man. That's Raj, right?
That's for sure.
Yeah. My question is the following. You obviously had a prolific operating career as the CEO of PepsiCo, Fortune 50 company. At what point did you decide, and what was sort of your thought process to transition out of an operating role and do the things you're doing now, which includes, board work, philanthropic work, teaching. How did you think about it? And what led you to that? And then the second part B to that is, as you think about your philanthropic engagements, what's the framework you use on what to engage your time with? Because I mean, I'm sure you get flooded with all kinds of requests to get involved. How do you prioritize, your time and effort and resources as you engage in those not-for-profit engagements?
So CEOs step down from their jobs for several reasons. One, the board throws them out. Second, you're just exhausted and you've done enough. Or third, it's because your successors are ready. Okay. In my case, it was number 2 and 3. I've been CEO for 12 years. The average time a person was CEO in my industry was between 5 and 6 years. I'd done 2 6-year terms in my head. All right. And so I was exhausted. And I had 4 successors ready. It was a luxury for the company. We'd spend days and years developing them, pull them up from, lower levels, but created 4 fantastic successors. And I wanted the board to be able to pick the right successor from among 4 people as opposed to 3 leaving, and therefore you're left with just 1 choice. So I thought the timing was right. I actually started the discussion, as I say in my book, 2 years before I actually moved out. But our board is so diligent. They actually did the work with great care to get to know each candidate and made the choice, and a damn good one at that. And so I think you step out for one of the 3 reasons. Hopefully it's not the first one, which is the board throws you out, okay? So that's a board thing. How do you decide what to do? You will get so many requests. My God, it's 1 a day. Sometimes people come to ask you to be advisors or be on SPAC boards, offering you huge amounts of money. Don't let money guide you. If you did that, it's over. You'll end up doing all the crazy things. Somebody once told me, whatever you take on, make sure it's a continuation of your life. So for example, I was about performance with purpose at PepsiCo. The book was about purpose. I'm living a life of purpose. When I teach up at West Point, it's living a life of purpose. When I'm working on childcare issues now with various organizations, it's living a life of purpose. Okay. So first is carrying on the life of purpose. Second is on boards and getting involved in organizations. I was told, get involved in something where you're learning something totally new. Get involved in something where you're really contributing. And get involved in something where nobody knows what the hell it is, but you're trying to figure it out yourself. I'm involved in Philips, where I'm learning a lot about the medical technology industry that needs to go through profound change. Okay? I'm involved in things like Memorial Sloan Kettering, National Gallery of Art, where I may not know cancer or art, but I know governance. So I'm contributing profoundly there. And then Amazon blows my mind. I'm learning something every day with Amazon. It's one of the most consequential companies on the planet. And every day I learn something. Of course, I contribute in terms of governance and knowledge, but it blows my mind. And so I always put every request I get into one of these 3 buckets and say, is it worth my time? Sometimes I do things to help friends out, but largely not.
Great words. And do give my hello to Raj as well.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Razat. I'm going to call up MR, our founder and chairman, and the vision and the force behind Indiaspora with his energy every day for the past 10 years now. Just before I do that, I want to make sure that I thank all our participants for having been part of this program, this wonderful program with Indra. Indra, thank you. And I want to thank our team as well. Most of all, we have an excellent team here in Indiaspora, and particularly for this program, the support given by Mansi Patel, our Director of Communications, and Rucha Gopal, our Senior Coordinator of Events, has been invaluable. So thanks to the team. And MR, if you want to come on, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Indra. And you know what? I don't have a copy of a signed book.
I'll send you one.
It's hard to do that.
I'll send you both one.
So would love your signature on the book. Yeah. And I'll give that to my daughter, and I'll send you. It's to make it out to Anjali. That would be the best.
Anjali, yep, I will do that.
And thank you so much. Can't let you go without 2 questions. Cricket. We've not discussed cricket this entire time. So quickly, what do you think of India's future in cricket as we got new captains, a captain coming, the movie 83? What's your opinion of cricket in India at the moment?
India always surprises me. I was so sure they're going to do great in the World Cup. And then I don't know what happened. I actually thought this was the year they were going to make it in South Africa, where they were not going to lose a test series. I think they're going to lose a test series. So I have no idea. I want to say India is cricket greatness with a twist. That's the best way. I don't know how else to state it. So don't be confident about India's trajectory. There's always going to be twists and turns when there should not be twists and turns. The amount India spends on cricket, the caliber of Indian cricket, what's been happening recently surprises me. But again, I've got to celebrate the positive and put the others aside. To me, the focus right now is getting cricket into the Olympics. It's very important. Once you put it into the Olympics, it becomes a global sport as opposed to a Commonwealth sport. And putting India into the Olympics will force more countries to play cricket. And India to actually be serious about the Olympics and getting gold medals. Okay. Sometimes I wish they should include spelling bee and geographic bee in the Olympics so we can get gold medals. But if cricket is included, maybe we can actually do well. Maybe underline the word maybe. But it's time that we all leaned in to say, how can we make cricket a reality in the World Cup? South Asia is one of the countries that watches the least amount of the Olympics. And so including cricket will actually bring that whole continent in to watch the Olympics. So whoever can help in any way, please do. We'd love to. ICC would love to bring Olympics into cricket. Cricket into the Olympics.
Great. And one last question. I know you've been at Pepsi, the sponsor of the Super Bowl for many, many, many years. Your predictions for the Super Bowl this year, the Super Bowl.
Not a chance. I can't even go there because many of these owners are great friends of mine. I am not going to pick one owner over the other. Not a chance. You know what? I've got to tell you though, the games of the last 2 weeks have been fantastic. Every one of them, the 49ers Cowboys game was a heartstopper. Kansas City Buffalo Bills. I was biting my nails at the last minute. So every game, the Green Bay San Francisco game was a fantastic game. So I think NFL has given us an amazing roster of games to watch and, all the way to the last second and into the overtime. So enjoy it.
Absolutely. I can be totally biased. I'm a huge 49er fan and I want to see them win the Super Bowl this year. So,
I love the 49ers too. And I think they have a good shot.
Yeah. So let's see. But once again, Indra, thank you for taking an extended amount of time with us today. And really enjoyed the program and great to see someone from Chennai be with us today. So once again, thank you everyone for joining. And Indra, thank you so much for being
Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Sanjeev. And thank you all for joining. Appreciate the time.
Loved it, Indra. What a pleasure. Thank you.